Hi, I'm Curious Vedanth and welcome to the season 3 finale episode. This is the 72nd episode of my podcast and I'm super duper excited. Today, there are 3 people involved in bringing to you Curious Vedanth, that is, my father Jayasimha, my mother Divya and I are having a conversation about my learning so far and how each episode comes about.
Hi Vedant, it's really nice to be talking to you at the end of 3 seasons of your podcast.
Yeah, I think you're going to know a lot about my podcast, even though you know a lot already.
Yeah. So the first question that I have, Vedant, is that now we started this podcast when we moved to Singapore, and now it's almost a year and a half since we've been in Singapore.
Yeah.
Do you like Singapore?
Yes, I love Singapore. It's so nice.
So what do you like about Singapore?
Well, I just like the weather. I like the feeling. It's just so safe. And even if I leave something, example in a food court or somewhere, I can still go to get it back.
Nice. So this kind of is, Singapore gives you permission to be absent-minded.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So can you take your guests or your listeners through the process of the podcast?
So basically, Jasma, first we need to find the guest. I mean, you don't know what to say until you have a guest. Then the guest sends you their introduction. You make questions from that introduction and you put a part of the introduction as the introduction to your podcast. After that, we record the podcast on Zoom or sometimes physically. After that, as you know, you edit it and then Amma makes the thumbnail photo and the description. Then sometimes it's you or sometimes it's Amma. One of you put it on Buzzsprout, the place where podcast is hosted. Then we put it out on my website, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, all of those places. And we just wait for the listeners to come in.
So do you have a criteria as to who can be your guest, or like how do you call or how do you decide as to who can be a guest on your podcast?
So, that's an interesting question which I haven't thought about. So, first they need to be interesting, the job they do and everything. Next, I need to have some background knowledge about that topic. Then, they need to be a good speaker, of course. Then, that's it. Those are the 3 criteria.
So, Vedant, you just said in the introduction that this is your 72nd episode.
Yes.
That's I would first like to congratulate you on completing this and doing this for 72 weeks, every week without missing a single episode.
Thank you. And remember that 50th episode special? Mm-hmm. That felt like as if it was just yesterday.
Yeah, I know. So, out of all these episodes, what are the few things, tell me 5 things that you have learned, either from the content of the episode or from just doing this podcast for 72 weeks?
Okay, so first, even though there were lots of ups and downs, I enjoyed overall, and I learned that even if it's hard, just keep going. I didn't know anything about planes. I didn't know how they were manufactured. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what the metal tube was called. So that was very interesting for me because I love planes, and I don't know, it was very interesting to learn about something you use to travel from one place to another. And then third, about the end of a season. I mean, it's just very nice. It's a good feeling that you get. You've accomplished 24 episodes, which is one season, and you just get a very good feeling. And also my first episode, which was my mother, you. I learned a lot. I didn't know that much about you. So the fifth one, I've also noticed that it's more fun to interview when the person is sitting right in front of you and you're interviewing, not over Zoom or something. Yeah, so that's the last point.
That's good. Yeah, I think with the pandemic ending, we can try and make more and more in-person interviews than Zoom interviews.
That would be super fun.
So one thing that I think your listeners don't know about you is your love for the Singapore metro systems, right? So can you tell us why you started liking the Singapore metro system?
I've been on the Washington DC MRT, the metro, the most. And after that, we came to Singapore from India. And then I just saw the buses and the trains, and I found those very fascinating. Just a train comes every 2 to 3 minutes, buses come. There are many buses that you can't even keep track of the number. And that even though Singapore is small, the metro system keeps expanding. So I find that very interesting.
Most of our listeners are not in Singapore. So can you give them like a brief introduction about the Singapore metro?
So the first stage, the first few stations opened in 1987. Before that, they went to different countries to just find out about the metro system, like Paris, New York, Japan, and all those places which already had a metro system. Then they came here, and then the Prime Minister and the government, they said, "Yup, go ahead, build the system." And this was in 1984. So, 3 years later, the first stage was open, and it's been expanding every few years since.
And there's something you're looking forward to, right, with regarding this expansion that's happening?
Yes, actually August 28th, which is next Saturday, the second stage of the Brown Line, which is the 6th MRT line, will open. The first stage was 3 stations, and that opened last year, January. And then the second stage, but that stage, the previous one, the first one, was supposed to open in 2019 because of COVID, it delayed. And the second stage was supposed to open last year, and the third stage this year. So it just moved by 1 year because of COVID.
So Vedant, we know that you know the Singapore metro system by heart.
Yes,
We're going
that
to
is
do a
true.
bit of a quiz. So listeners, Vedant doesn't have a Singapore map, and I'm going to randomly ask 2 stations in different lines of Singapore, and then Vedant will tell us from how to get from one place to other. So Vedant, your first question: how do you go from Gul Circle to Serangoon?
Gul Circle is on the green line, and Serangoon would be on the purple line. So one way I would know, this would be like probably 20 or 30 minutes, would be go from Gul Circle on the green line to Outram Park MRT, change to the purple line and go to Serangoon.
Wow, that's really good.
And Serangoon is on the purple line, by the way.
Okay, that's good. Okay, that's interesting. That's correct. Okay, are you ready for another one? Okay, how do you go from Bukit Gombak to City Hall?
So, Bukit Gombak is on the red line and City Hall is on the green line. There are 2 ways. City Hall is also an interchange with the red line. So there are 2 ways. One is the long way. You go from Bukit Gombak directly on the red line to City Hall, which would be about a few hours. And then Or you go from Bukit Gombak to Jurong East, which is an interchange with the Green Line, and go to City Hall.
Correct.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you one. Let's see, I'm going to try and find you a tough one. Okay, how do you go from Bidok to Woodlands?
Okay, Bedok is on the Green Line, and Woodlands is on the Red Line. So you will go from Bedok to Bugis, take the Blue Line and change at Newton, which is an interchange with the Red Line, which is also on the Downtown Line, and then go to, wait, what was the second station again?
Woodlands.
Yeah, and then go to Woodlands.
Okay. Okay, and okay, I'm going to one last one. Which is this, yeah. Harbourfront and Marina Bay are really close to each other by road, but on the Circle Line they are really far away because they are not connected. So it's almost one entire circle except for the bit between them. So it's the first stop and the last stop on the Circle Line. Tell me a quicker way to get to Marina Bay by MRT from Harbourfront.
First, in the future, they will connect Harbourfront to Marina Bay via the Circle Line 6, which is opening in 2026, hopefully, which will consist of 3 stations. But other than that, from Harbourfront, you go to Bishan, change to the Red Line, and go to Marina Bay. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, that's one way, but that's not the shortest way.
Yes, the other way would be go from Harbourfront, take the Purple Line, go to Outram Park. Then take the Green Line to Raffles Place, change at the Red Line, and go to Marina Bay.
Perfect.
So that's nice, Vedant. So you have all of these things. So maybe when people come to Singapore, you can take them around and show them the entire metro system.
That might take around 2 or 3 days.
Okay. So you're just coming to an end of your vacation time, Vedant. So what was the most fun thing that you did in your vacation?
So the number one thing would of course be spending time with both of you and Amma.
What about the going to the LTA?
Mobility.
Yes, that was the best thing ever. You have to go there if you come to Singapore.
Yeah, what was that place? What's the mobility gallery?
Well, it's a place that tells you about the future and past of Singapore mobility. It has bingo, and then if you win the bingo, you get two 3D puzzles. But if you win 2 lines out of the 4 lines, you get 1 3D puzzle.
And how many 3D puzzles did you get?
2.
Very good. So what is that one thing that you learned in the mobility gallery that you didn't know before?
How they maintain the tunnels. I saw that they use drones to maintain the tunnels. They just check using the drones if there are any. Before both of you continue asking me questions, I have a question for you, Jayasimha. My guests keep asking me how I got the idea of starting the podcast. But everyone knows now that it was your idea initially. But I'm curious to know, how did you come up with the idea of the podcast?
As you know, Vedant, I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yes, you do.
A lot of podcasts. And it's probably one of the best way to know about an issue because you get into conversations and you can listen. And also podcasts are also ad free. So if you're watching something on YouTube, you end up getting ads and things like that. It's ad free. You can listen to them while you're in a train, while in a bus, while you're cooking, and you can just learn so much about different things. So I learned so much about podcasts. And I also thought that as podcast host, as well as people who are assisting the host to come up with the podcast, talking to so many people will be fun. So that's how I decided that, or suggested rather, that you should start your own podcast. And I'm really glad that you took that suggestion and have continued this for over 70 weeks now.
Yeah. And listeners, if you haven't heard this in my earlier episodes, this is what I tell my listeners. So one day during the circuit breaker in Singapore last year, my father was just lying down with me and he's asked me, do you want to start your podcast? And I said yes. So my first guest was my mother.
Yeah, and since then it's been a fun ride.
Very fun.
And now we are now going to look forward to the 4th season of this podcast.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Wait, and listeners, look forward to something fun at the end of the 5th season.
So, is there something you would like to tell anybody else who want to start a podcast or do something that is a little different from what they would normally do during their spare time?
Okay, so it depends on what kind of podcast you want. Some podcasts are just people talking, and some, like Curious Vedanth, are interviews. So if you want, I think I know more about interviews because that's what I'm doing. So if you want an interview, listen to podcast interviews. It'll help a lot, and you'll just learn how to talk. You'll just learn the flow, and yeah, just use basic equipment, probably like an iPad or phone or computer, and then but after a few seasons, a few episodes or season or one season, just invest in a microphone, and then it'll help you a lot. So that's one tip. And after that, just believe in yourself.
Very nice, very good tip. And you've inspired a few people whom we know to start their own podcasts.
I've actually inspired two of my cousins. One in USA, his name is Ishan. I've interviewed him, and one Abhiram in Toronto, Canada, and I've interviewed him too. Ishan's podcast is called The Green Link, and the link to that is in the show notes. And then one more is A Thirsty Mind, which is Abhiram's, and that is in the show notes as well.
Yeah, fun. So a lot of people who listen to you want to kind of start their own podcast, and it's really fun that you are able to do it and inspire other people to do it as well.
So, who would be your dream guest that you would like to have on your podcast?
Well, I've answered that question already, so here it goes again. I don't know.
That one person or even two people who or even the topic that you think would be really, really exciting for you.
Yeah, Lego, the CEO of Lego.
Okay. So we'll try and reach out to Lego or anybody, the listeners, if you have any contacts with Lego who can get somebody from Lego as a guest.
Yeah, go to my website, press contact us, and then I'll get an email and respond to you.
Perfect. So Vedanth, looking forward to 4th season.
Yes, I am.
This is all very fun. Are there any changes to expect in your podcast in season 4?
Yes. So, you know how my podcast comes every Thursday at 12 in the 12 midnight?
Singapore time, that is.
Singapore time, that is. It'll come 8 o'clock Singapore time. Yeah, on Saturday morning, 8 o'clock.
Okay, we're just making this so that both of us can get some sleep and post. So we will post a new time in which this is going to be released, and this is going to continue to be a weekly podcast.
Yep, it will.
Okay. Thank you so much, Vedanth, for speaking, and look forward to the next season of Curious Vedanth.
Yeah, dear listeners, thank you for listening to this season finale, and thank you both of you for interviewing me.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Vedanth.
It was a pleasure listening to you and asking you these questions. Looking forward to many, many more episodes of yours.
Thank you. Follow my Facebook page, Curious Vedanth, to get updates on my upcoming podcast. To listen at leisure on your phone and get notified about future episodes, subscribe by searching for Curious Vedanth wherever you get your podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also listen to my show on CuriousVedanth.com. Thank you for listening to Curious Vedanth, and don't forget to rate and leave comments.